This is part of a larger work in progress, which I'm developing under the auspices of the Institute for Rediscovering Psychoanalysis. And I'd like to offer you two watchwords that you might hold in mind as you listen to my remarks. The first watchword is epistemicide. This term, as far as I'm aware, was developed by Boaventura de Sousa Santos, and it refers to the devaluing, censoring, or outright annihilation of a way of knowing one's own or communally lived experience by the imposition of a hegemonic worldview. That is to say, how one way of experiencing the world can be wiped out by a dominant epistemology. And the second watchword I'd like to offer you is naivete, which let's extend the definition of it beyond it simply being a matter of being artless, credulous, and uncritical, to encompass any ideological position that fails to interrogate its own positionality. If we extend the definition of naivete in this manner, then over the past century, I think that much, not all, but much of the psychoanalytic movement, which I'm not treating as if it's monolithic or homogeneous, but much of the psychoanalytic movement, despite the apparent commitment of our discipline to reflective thinking, I think is open to the charge of naivete. So I want to make a small remedy towards I want to make a small contribution towards the remedy of this. My background for such an effort, as Lena sort of indicated, I've been interested since before my undergraduate years in comparative study of ways of healing. I've practiced psychoanalytically since 1975. I was a training analyst for just under 10 years in the USA. And in 2010, I joined a small group of training analysts committed to the formal establishment of a new training institute in that country, an enterprise that Jonathan Sklar contributed to mightily, heroically, in fact. Subsequently, I was also appointed, as Lena said, as a supervising analyst with the Indian Psychoanalytic Society, which, as you may know, and it's interesting, is actually the second oldest training institute in that it's been continuously operating since 1922. I've also lived and studied for extended periods in India and in Thailand. Now, there is a triple context for this paper, a triple context for the questions that I want to raise this evening. First context, the IPA is about to inaugurate a fourth region comprising of training programs in India, Australia, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and China. Africa, where I am, by the way, is still in Europe, according to the IPA. So although focused rather specifically on the haughtiness of North Atlantic attitudes toward Latin America, Jacques Derrida's 1991 paper on the geopolitics of psychoanalysis actually retains its pertinence today. By the way, in this talk, I'm only focused on Asia and Africa. I have little knowledge of South America, which, as you know, has its own rather specific diasporic history of psychoanalytic thinking. So, might one not imagine that the IPA's patronage of these Asian organizations, each of which has for some years been substantively under the benefaction of an established European or American institute, the patronage of these Asian organizations, by now permitting them to enjoy their own regional federation, would one not imagine that this might be an occasion for reflection on what it means to propagate a discipline in cultures that are not of its origin? Indeed, more boldly, couldn't we dare to imagine that this might even be an occasion to interrogate what it might mean to think psychoanalytically and to practice psychoanalytically outside or even beyond the discipline's Eurocentric framing? But no, I can find scant evidence that any such self-interrogation is actually occurring. I hope I'm not being unfair. I would welcome it if there was evidence that such a self-interrogation was going on. So here's the second context for this rather rudimentary talk this evening. In 2017, I attended the International Psychoanalytic Association's fourth Asia conference in Taipei. The major plenary address was delivered by the IPA's top elected official. Leaving aside the stumbling and almost incoherent presentation of his paper, which was a second-hand paper, and to be fair, the presentation was worsened by being translated into Mandarin only paragraph by paragraph. The concluding message of this presentation was very clear in its tone, if not in its exact wording. Psychoanalysis will teach you how to be compassionate and caring interlocutors with your fellow human beings. Apparently, it was assumed that these were skills more or less unfamiliar to an audience of about 600 mental health professionals from this region. I was so troubled by this performance that I wrote a couple of papers, both of which have been published, questioning what is being exported when psychoanalysis is brought to cultures that are historically outside the Eurocentricity of North Atlantic thinking.